אבינו שבשמיים, פותח ידיך ומצביע לכל חי רצון. Open up your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. For all the living shall find a delight in you. פותח את ידיך ומצביע לכל חי רצון. 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 Open up your gracious hand and satisfy all desires. Open up your gracious hand and satisfy all needs. Open up your gracious hand and satisfy all desires. Open up your gracious hand and satisfy all the living. Open up your gracious hand and satisfy all our desires.
wanna give a gift to you. Light up the night, my love shine through. From Mount Zion, this is what we do. Love to you, happy Hanukkah. I wanna give a gift to you. Light up the night, my love shine through. From Mount Zion, this is what we do. Love to you. Today is the day, tonight is the night. Sunset, twilight, head back, come along, take flight. I am twinkle and I sitting in the sky, that shine and I'm feeling alright. Like a wonderful one. This sunlight from low to above. Late night, celebrate till I fly in the sky like a dove. Let me unwind as I light up a flame in the name of the Lion of Judah. Drop like a hammer when I fall like a rain, sun shower, feel a pepper when I hit like a train. Happy Hanukkah, I wanna give a gift to you. Light up the night, my love shine through. From Zion, this is what we do. Love to you. Happy Hanukkah, I wanna give a gift to you. Light up the night, my love shine through. From Zion, this is what we do. Love to you. The cosmos goes inside. On our right to excite, now I'm fighting back. It's a time to divine, it's a battle through the spine, it's a battle from the ancient line. So now we never Maccabee till the end of time. You're my light in this hardest time. Yes, you bring peace to my mind. Won't you please let me unwind and light up a flame in the name of the Lion of Judah. Drop like a hammer when I fall like a rain, sun shower, feel a cover when I like a train. Happy Hanukkah, I wanna give a gift to you. Light up the lights, my love shine through. From Mount Zion, this is what we do. Love to you. Happy Hanukkah, I wanna give a gift to you. Light up the lights, my love shine through. From Mount Zion, this is what we do. Love to you. I wanna give a gift to you. Light up the night, my love shine through. From Mount Zion, this is what we do. Love to you. Happy Hanukkah. I wanna give a gift to you. Light up the night, my love shine through. From Mount Zion, this is what we do. Love to you.
Now, 1 Maccabees chapter 4, we read about the rededication of the temple. Because we know that Yehudah was able to come into the temple and to purify it and to prepare it and to dedicate it to Yahuwah. And this was a very important time because this took place 3 years later to fulfill the words of the scriptures that all had to be. He was able to do this before all of Israel to encourage them to know that Yahuwah lives and that there is no other and that He gives a victory in Israel. And this in itself was the great miracle, that the abomination of desolation was purged, idolatry removed, this ambiguous idea of the Most High who is carved out in an image form, destroyed. No more of that Jupiter, of that so-called Holy Father of the Greeks and later the Romans. No more of this ambiguous deity. But now the name of Yahuwah would be called upon again. As we even read in the Talmud that the Hasmoneans, who were the Maccabees, enforced that the name of Yahuwah should be used again at this time when they conquered the temple. And so we know that this is important to call on the name of Yahuwah for the rededication of not just a physical temple, but the altar of our hearts. Prepare our lives as a burnt sacrifice, an oblation, a sweet-smelling savor to Yahuwah. that we may be Hanukkah, that we may be
Hallelujah.
dedicated, rededicated to the Most High.
Praise ye Jah.
It says in 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 52, now on the 25th day, or the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Kaslu or Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar. They had to build a new altar. They couldn't use that old profane altar any longer. They had to build a new altar. And they did offerings upon it. It says, upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at that time. And what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. So they dedicated the altar at the same time period that it had been profaned years previous. And they did so with music and gladness. They rededicated the altar of Yahweh. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising Yahweh of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication, which is the word Hanukkah, in the Torah. We read about it, remember, at the beginning of the lesson. This is the Hanukkah of the altar in the day that it was anointed. This is the dedication of the altar in the day that it was anointed. And these men were doing a Torah commandment by rededicating the altar as it had been previously done. It says they rededicated the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrifice, the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. Now, why 8 days? This is actually very deep answer. So follow me and listen carefully. The scriptural answer can be found in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 at the dedication of the temple that Solomon dedicated originally to Yahweh when he, the first to build the temple of Yahweh, dedicated it. It says in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 8, and Shlomo or Solomon at that time observed the festival 7 days. So this is the festival of Sukkot, which is tabernacles. He observed the festival. And all Yisrael with him, a very great assembly from the entrance of Hamath to the Wadi of Mizraim. And on the 8th day, they held an assembly where they performed the dedication of the altar 7 days and the festival 7 days. So Shlomo or Solomon strategically marked the festival of Sukkot or tabernacles, which is prophetic, a time that shows that Yahweh will tabernacle with his people yet again. But he chose this time period to dedicate the temple of Yahweh. They kept the festival 7 days and they dedicated the altar 7 days. So they did Hanukkah and Sukkot there at the same time period. And it says that it was 8 days because we know that the 8th day of Sukkot is a solemn assembly time. It is a time when the Torah is read, a time of rejoicing. It is a time of gatherings. So many things that happen on the great 8th day of the festival. Okay, so this great 8th day was tied into the dedication of the altar as well, because they're doing offerings and they had just initiated this altar to Yahweh Elohim for the house of Yahweh. His presence came into that place, accepted the offering, sent fire, and this is very important to understand because Yahweh, he gave a great miracle at the dedication of this altar at this time period. He also did a great miracle at the time of the dedicating of the altar during Ezra's time that we read about in the book of Maccabees. He also did a great miracle at this time. We'll read about that in just a moment. But it's very important to understand that the original reason here for the 8 days of the dedication is because this is what happened at the original time that the temple was dedicated to Yahweh. So it's 8 days because of Sukkot and because of the dedication of the altar took 7 days. Okay, so it's very important. So people say, why not 7 days? Well, let's read a little further. We're going to actually go and read verse 59 of 1 Maccabees chapter 3. It says, moreover, Judas or Yehuda and his brothers with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days from the 25th day of the month of Keslu or Kislev, with mirth and gladness. So a great celebration. A great celebration would be done during this time period. But when we read in the book of Maccabees, we see that the original reason that this was done for 8 days and not just the 7 days for the dedicating of the altar was because in the 9th month, when they rededicated the altar, the Israelites had not been keeping the festivals, especially not tabernacles, because tabernacles would literally require you to set up booths. So for an entire army in the mountains of Yehuda who were trying to hide and do guerrilla warfare against the Greeks, setting up tabernacles and sleeping in them and all that was not very feasible. Now, I'm sure they had some type of camp strategy, but we also know that they stayed in caves because we know that region. We know what they were doing. But the point is that it wasn't very feasible for the entire nation to just go camp out, because previously we saw that Israelites even died on the Sabbath day because they wouldn't fight. They wouldn't even fight back on the Sabbath. But eventually, they realized, we can't keep getting killed on the Sabbath. We're going to have to fight even on the Sabbath day. So the festivals couldn't even be kept properly. Plus, all males were supposed to go to Jerusalem, to the temple, for the Feast of Sukkot. So all the males obviously aren't going to go there when the Greeks are occupying this space and they're killing everybody who's keeping the Torah. They're hiding in the mountains. So when they get there and they know that they missed the festival by 2 months, they want to celebrate Sukkot again. They know that it's late. They know it's not the real time, and they're not going to make this the official time of Sukkot. They're not doing anything like that. But what they're saying is they're saying that we have an opportunity to start anew. If we keep Sukkot now, we can get back on track in the time of spring for Passover. We can do all this, and this would be a great time of celebration for our people, a great revival for our people, that we can celebrate the experience of Yahuwah at His temple. A better way to celebrate the temple than the actual Feast of Tabernacles, which was always in link with this temple. According to Solomon's dedicating during that time period, the actual Festival of Sukkot, he dedicated the altar. So because of all these reasons, the Maccabees decided, we're going to celebrate Sukkot. It's a couple months late. We couldn't do it. We know we're not doing it exactly right, but nonetheless, we want to have a celebration. We're so excited because a great revival has happened. Okay, so these are the reasons. The real reason is because the first, and we read this again in the Maccabees, it tells us specifically that they kept Sukkot then. That's what they did. They kept the Feast of Tabernacles at that time. They knew it wasn't the right time, but again, they were so excited and wanted to celebrate Yahuwah that they did this. And so Yehuda and the Maccabees promoted the idea that year after year, this event should be commemorated because Yahuwah had brought a great redemption for the children of Israel. So that's the real reason. Now, there is a scroll called the Scroll of Antiochus that the Yemenite Jews preserved even to this day. And that's called Megillat Antiochus. And it says in the Megillat Antiochus, after this, the sons of Israel went up to the temple and rebuilt its gates and purified the temple from the dead bodies and from the defilement. And they sought after pure olive oil to light the lamps therewith, but could not find any except one bowl that was sealed with the signet ring of the high priest from the days of Samuel or Shemuel the prophet. And they knew that it was pure. There was enough to light the lamps for 1 day, but Yahuwah, the Elohim of heaven, whose name dwells there, put therein His barakah, His blessing, and they were able to light it from 8 days. So they were able to get just a little bit of olive oil that should have lasted only a day to last for 8 days, according to this document. Therefore the sons of Hashmoni made this covenant and took upon themselves a solemn vow, they and the sons of Israel, all of them, to publish amongst the sons of Israel. And they did. They wrote to Israelites that were in Egypt and various places who were not in the land of Israel at this time, the great things that took place. Matter of fact, that's how 2 Maccabees even begins. It's a letter to other Jews about the events that took place here. And it says, they published it among the sons of Israel, that they might observe these 8 days of joy and honor as the days of the feast written in the book of the law. So in other words, it's again saying as the 8 days of the feast written in the book of the law, in other words, Sukkot, because that's what they did. Now, they're not saying keep Sukkot, because no Jews, even to this day, call Hanukkah a Sabbath, or say they're Sabbaths, or say a Sukkot, or anything like that. Matter of fact, a lot of Jews today don't even realize there's a connection between Sukkot and Hanukkah, because they only know about the 8 days of the oil. That's the primary message, is the 8 days of the oil. It says that they might observe these days as the feast written in the book of the law, in other words, for 8 days, to lighten them so as to make known to those who come after them that their Elohim wrought for them salvation from heaven. So there's a message of this hidden oil. And this is a picture of Yahushua the Messiah. Because Yahushua the Messiah is sealed with Yahuwah's name, the Most High, the Elohim of Israel. He is the high priest. He wears it upon his head on the crown in the heavens, which he is in now. He wears that name. So it is very important. He's sealed, and he's also the hidden oil. The oil that nobody knows or realizes. People keep missing, especially the Israelites, because the scriptures tell us that they would not receive the Messiah fully, that many would, but not the entire nation, until the restoration of all things. When Yahushua is revealed at his coming, many will then turn to him and be saved. So this is very important to understand these things. But the point is that this is a picture of him, the hidden oil. It's also a picture of the 144,000 that we read of that will be in the last days, Israelites, 12,000 from every tribe, sealed with Yahuwah's name in their forehead, and they are filled with what? The oil, which is what? Symbolic of the Ruach HaKodesh, the set-apart spirit. What people call it the Holy Spirit, we call it the Ruach HaKodesh, is the set-apart spirit of Yahuwah, Elohim, the wind and breath of Yahuwah, even is what Ruach implies. So this is very important, because the oil is symbolic of the anointing, is symbolic of the Ruach, is symbolic of all these things. So this idea is very, very important. But that miracle alone would not have been the reason to celebrate Hanukkah. That's not enough. Because you see, Yahuwah created everything out of nothing, so to multiply oil is a simple thing. He even did that in the days of Eliyahu, who was called Elijah the prophet. He did that in the days of Elisha. He multiplied the oil. So we know that multiplying the oil is a small thing. Even Yahushua was able to multiply from just a small amount of loaves and fish, enough to feed thousands. So that reason is just not enough. The real miracle is the restoration of the covenant, the restoration of the house of Yahuwah, the restoration of pure worship, the restoration of calling upon the name, a revival of Torah, a revival of the instructions of the Most High, taking a stand against wickedness, against darkness. Yahushua said, I am the light of the world.
That's right.
So he is the light. We know that Yeshayahu says about the Messiah that the nations will see a great light. Yahushua is the light. He's a picture of the hidden oil. He's also a picture of the menorah, of the candlestick of Yahuwah, which literally, not even candles, is an oil lamp. But this is how people know it, the seven-branched lampstand of Yahuwah, the menorah. This is a picture of Yahushua also. He is the high priest. Also, remember that. So remember when the high priest came into the temple, he didn't know there was oil. He found some. He found some, and it was that hidden treasure that would last and would be pure before him. And this is a picture of Yahushua when he comes and finds his servants doing the will of Yahuwah, and they will be that hidden treasure in his kingdom. They were hidden to the world, but they will be the treasure of the kingdom. Very important. He is also the lion of the tribe of Yehuda, obviously, which Judah the Maccabee was a great military general, but what Yahushua will do when he comes is greater. And just like the Malachim assisted Yehuda, the Malachim of the heavens, the messengers of the heavens, are coming with Yahushua when he comes to destroy the wickedness from off the face of the earth. Very important. So, Josephus also mentions this time of Hanukkah, and he calls it the Festival of Lights. But he gives a different reason. He doesn't mention the 8 days of the oil at all. He says, I suppose the reason was because this liberty beyond our hopes appeared to us, and that from there was the name given to that festival, the Festival of Lights. So he was saying because a great liberty appeared, that must have been the reason. He doesn't mention the oil. For this reason and other reasons, many people don't even believe the miracle of the oil took place. I do believe it was a historical event. There's just too much evidence that kind of pushes in that direction. But either way, that is not even the major significance. Again, the major significance was the purifying of the altar and the reinstitution of true worship, of the true Elohim, the true Father, the true Most High of the heavens, who is Yahuwah, who has a name, and it was called upon. The restoration of the name is what we should be celebrating this Hanukkah. That is what we should be doing. That's what we should be doing. Understanding the history, reading the history year after year. These are important. What did Yahushua say about Hanukkah? After all, when you read in the scriptures, you won't find Hanukkah anywhere except for in John chapter 10 in the Brit Hadashah, what is called the Renewed Testament, or Renewed Covenant, literally. But in John chapter 10, Yahuchanan chapter 10, verse 22, it says, at that time, the Hanukkah came to be. Now, your translation may say the Feast of Dedication, but the word dedication is Hanukkah. So the Feast of Dedication was the Hanukkah. So the time of Hanukkah came to be in Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, and it was winter, and Yahushua was walking in the set-apart place in the porch of Solomon, so that the Yahudim surrounded him and said to him, how long do you keep us in suspense? If you are HaMashiach, the Messiah, the Anointed, say to us plainly. Yahushua answered them, I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, again, the restoration of the name of Yahuwah, because he proclaimed it. Yahushua proclaimed the name of Yahuwah to his brothers, specifically, and it says, the works that I do in my Father's name, that means healing the blind, healing the lepers, raising the dead. Those works he did, what? In his Father's name, they bear witness concerning me. But you do not believe, because you are not of my sheep, as I said to you. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. And I give them everlasting life, and they shall by no means ever perish, and no one shall snatch them out of my hand. Now, Yahushua is at the porch of Solomon during the time of Hanukkah. And this is the message that he's speaking of, everlasting life. And your mind immediately goes back to those martyrs, those young men who said to the king that they would die for the covenant. And they put out their tongue so that the king could cut it off. And they didn't even work. They weren't even fazed by the pain. And they stuck out their hands and they said, these I have been given from heaven. I will receive them again because I will raise up, but you will have no resurrection. They knew there was a resurrection. Yahushua was preaching the message of the resurrection in honor of these martyrs and the slain who died during this time period. He is there specifically to honor them and to honor the time of Hanukkah. And he is there for this reason. Many people try to say today, because they think they understand the scriptures, that he just happened to be at Solomon's porch during this time period because he was often there. They don't even know the scriptures. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. How do we know? Well, we go to John chapter 7, verse 1. It says, and after this, Yahushua was walking in Galilee, for he did not wish to walk in Yehuda, because the Yahudim were seeking to kill him. This is just 3 chapters before he goes to Solomon's porch. In Jerusalem, he's saying here, he didn't even want to go to Jerusalem anymore because the Jews were trying to kill him. And we see in John chapter 7, he needed to go there for the Feast of Tabernacles for Sukkot. And that was mandatory. And he went up, but he did in secret. He hid in secret during the festival of Sukkot. He didn't go to Solomon's porch and make any loud proclamations during the very Feast of Tabernacles, a commanded feast, a commanded Torah feast. He hid as in secret. But then 3 chapters later, for Hanukkah, he boldly comes to the porch of Solomon and makes this proclamation in front of everybody that he would give those who believe in him everlasting life. The light of the world makes this declaration to the children of Israel, and he tells the Pharisees that they're not even of his sheep. Many Pharisees believed in Yahushua, and they followed Yahushua. Many of them. We read about elders of Israel who did, like Nicodemus and people like that. Nectamon, different men. Joseph of Arimathea, leaders of the people, believed in Yahushua. We see this clearly. But the problem he had with the Pharisees is he says the Pharisees add to the commandment traditions of men and make the commandments of Yahuwah of no effect. And they've even done this with Hanukkah. You see, for Hanukkah now, when they light the menorah, it's a tradition that wasn't even started by the Pharisees, but before Pharisees ever even existed. It was started by the Hashmonim, or the Maccabees, by the priests. It was a law during that time. The priests made it a law that people would, celebrate this time period and acknowledge the great victory, and they did so. And Yahushua came 160 some years after this event. He comes on the scene just 160 years. This event's still kind of fresh. I mean, that's not that long, actually. And so he comes on the scene, and he begins to preach this message, and he comes boldly during this time period because Hanukkah is a picture of the last days, and Yahushua wanted us to know that. It's not just there for no reason. And people say, well, it's not a commanded feast, so we don't observe it. Or this or that, or, just because it's not in the Torah. But Yahushua himself showed up at Solomon's porch, risking his life. And just 3 chapters earlier, again, he didn't want to do that during the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. But yet he did it for the dedication. Why? Again, because he knew his students would search this matter out diligently, and they would begin to tie in the understanding of the last days and what would transpire. Hanukkah is a foreshadowing. All the persecution and everything that took place, it's a foreshadowing of the New World Order, of this end times beast system. Prepare yourselves. Get yourselves ready. That's what the message is. He says he will give them everlasting life. Now,